Welcome to English Podcast Station, where we learn English through powerful stories from history. Our tales use clear and simple English, perfect for learners of all levels. If you enjoy our stories, please leave a comment below and let us know what you think. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to click the like button. Your support helps us bring you more exciting episodes. Now let's begin our story together. Chapter 1. A Prince of Macedonia. In the ancient land of Macedonia, surrounded by mountains and valleys, a prince was born. His name was Alexander. Alexander grew up in a grand palace full of noise, politics, and royal responsibilities. His father, King Philip II, was a strong and clever ruler. His mother, Queen Olympias, was known for her strength and passion. From them, Alexander inherited a deep desire for greatness. From a young age, Alexander trained hard. He learned to ride horses, to fight in battle, and to lead men. But he was also curious. He wanted to know more about the world. To feed this curiosity, Alexander was sent to study with Aristotle, one of the greatest thinkers in history. In a peaceful place away from the palace, Alexander learned philosophy, science, and politics. He listened to stories of ancient heroes and imagined exploring distant lands. At the same time, Alexander watched his father rule. He saw how Philip made allies and defeated enemies. These early lessons in leadership stayed with Alexander forever. One day, Persian diplomats came to visit. Persia was the most powerful empire at the time. Alexander watched closely as his father spoke with the envoys. He admired Philip's calm and clever way of handling their visit. It was a moment that left a strong impression on him. As Alexander grew older, he began leading military missions. On one of his first campaigns, he led an army to stop a rebellion and won. His soldiers respected him, and Alexander discovered he loved being a leader. But life at court was not easy. Tension grew between Alexander and his father, especially after Philip married a new wife. At a wedding feast, an argument broke out. Alexander felt insulted and stormed out in anger. He and his mother left the palace. For a while, Alexander lived in exile, thinking about his future. He dreamed of uniting Greece and defeating Persia. Eventually, he returned. His father knew he needed Alexander. They made peace. But soon after, tragedy struck. King Philip was murdered. Alexander became king at just 20 years old. With the crown on his head, he stood before his people. He was ready to fulfill not just his father's dream, but his own. Chapter 2. Under Aristotle's guidance. When Alexander was 13, his father made an important decision. He sent Alexander to study with Aristotle, the famous philosopher from Athens. Their school was not a building with walls. It was nature itself. They studied under trees, near streams, and in the quiet of the countryside. Aristotle taught Alexander more than facts. He taught him how to think. They talked about good and evil, about choices and consequences. They read stories of heroes like Achilles and Hercules, not just to admire them, but to learn what it means to lead. They explored science, looking at plants, animals, and the stars. Alexander was amazed by the idea that nature followed rules that could be understood. This curiosity would stay with him throughout his life. They also studied politics and different ways to govern. Aristotle asked hard questions. What makes a good king? What is justice? Alexander was eager to answer. One of Aristotle's most powerful lessons was the idea of arete, excellence in everything. A great ruler, he said, must be wise, brave, kind, and just. This idea became part of who Alexander was. But education was not just books and philosophy. Alexander learned music and played the lyre. He exercised and played sports. Aristotle believed a leader needed both a strong mind and a healthy body. Over time, Alexander and Aristotle grew close. Aristotle became not just a teacher, but a mentor and friend. When Alexander left Mysa, he was ready, not just to rule, but to become a legend. Chapter 3: The Young King. When King Philip was assassinated, Alexander became king. He was only 20. The news shocked the world. Many thought Macedonia would fall apart under such a young ruler. But Alexander acted fast. Some regions tried to break away. Alexander marched quickly to stop them. He showed he was not a boy, but a king. He used both force and kindness to unite the kingdom again. Alexander also wanted to continue his father's dream, to conquer Persia. But first, he had to control Greece. Some Greek cities resisted. When Thebes rebelled, Alexander attacked. He destroyed the city as a warning. Other cities quickly agreed to follow him. With Greece united, Alexander prepared for war. He built a great army, not just of Macedonians, but of many Greeks who believed in his vision. He also worked to strengthen his kingdom. He improved the economy and made sure Macedonia was stable before leaving. Every night, he remembered Aristotle's lessons. He knew that to lead people, he must understand them. And so, with wisdom in his mind and fire in his heart, Alexander stood ready. He looked east toward Persia. His journey as a conqueror was about to begin. Chapter 4: The Path to Persia. The sun rose over Macedonia as Alexander's army prepared to march. Their goal, the mighty Persian Empire. But first, they had to cross the Hellespont, a narrow strip of water between Europe and Asia. Crossing it was not just a challenge, it was a symbol. Alexander was leaving home and entering enemy land. He threw a spear into the ground and claimed the land for Greece. Soon the first battle came at the Granicus River. Persian forces were waiting. Many of Alexander's generals wanted to wait until morning, but Alexander was bold. He ordered an attack right away. The river was deep and fast. Arrows rained down, but Alexander led from the front. He fought bravely, even face to face with Persian nobles. It was a hard battle, but the Macedonians pushed forward. Their training, discipline, and belief in Alexander helped them win. The Persians ran, and their leaders were defeated. The victory at Granicus was huge. It showed the world that Alexander was not just a king, he was a conqueror. After this, many cities in Asia Minor welcomed him. He offered freedom from Persian rule, and they opened their gates. Still, Alexander knew the hardest part was ahead. Darius III, the Persian king, was preparing a giant army. The real war had just begun, but Alexander was ready. The path to Persia was long, but he had taken the first steps, and there was no turning back. Chapter 5: The Siege of Tyre. Following his victory at Granicus, Alexander marched through Asia Minor, unstoppable and ambitious. Yet a formidable challenge awaited him: the island city of Tyre. Perched offshore in the Mediterranean, Tyre was no ordinary stronghold. Its towering walls, surrounded by water, made it a fortress unlike any Alexander had faced. But to control the eastern Mediterranean and secure his fleet's safety, he had to take the city. When Alexander sent envoys offering peace in exchange for surrender, the Tyrians refused. Confident in their island's natural defenses, they believed no army, not even Alexander's, could breach their walls. That defiance would lead to one of history's most extraordinary sieges. Unable to launch a direct assault, Alexander devised a bold plan. He would build a causeway, essentially a massive bridge, from the mainland to the island. It was an audacious feat of engineering, requiring endless labor and materials. Many doubted it could be done. The Tyrians didn't wait idly. As the causeway grew, they launched attacks from ships and rained down fire and missiles. Alexander's men suffered heavy losses, but the work continued. To protect his builders, Alexander ordered the construction of giant siege towers armed with archers and catapults. He also summoned ships from allied ports, forming a fleet to challenge Tyre at sea and prevent reinforcements or escape. For 7 grueling months, the siege dragged on. The Tyrians fought with desperation. Alexander countered with ingenuity. Eventually, the causeway reached the island. His towers loomed over the walls. His fleet blocked the harbor. A final brutal assault broke Tyre's defenses. The city fell. The victory was both strategic and symbolic. It proved that even the most daunting obstacles couldn't stand against Alexander's will. But it came at a cost. Tyre was devastated, and many of its defenders were killed or enslaved, a warning to others who might resist. The siege of Tyre showed the world that Alexander was not only a brilliant tactician, but a man determined to bend the world to his vision. Chapter 6: Egypt's New Ruler. With Tyre behind him, Alexander turned his gaze southward to Egypt. Unlike previous battles, there would be no siege here. Egypt, long under Persian control, welcomed Alexander as a liberator. His arrival was met with open arms by a people eager for change. From peasants to priests, all hailed him as their new pharaoh. Alexander understood the value of symbolism. He respected Egyptian customs, offered sacrifices to their gods, and accepted the role of pharaoh. In doing so, he didn't just win territory, he won hearts. One of his most mysterious and meaningful acts during his stay was his journey to the Oracle of Siwa, deep in the desert. The trip was long and dangerous through scorching sands and barren land, but Alexander pressed on. The oracle, believed to speak for the gods, received him in secret. What was said remains unknown. When Alexander emerged, he carried a renewed sense of destiny, as if the gods themselves had affirmed his path. Emboldened, Alexander embarked on a visionary project, founding the city of Alexandria. He personally chose its site on the Mediterranean coast. It would become a beacon of trade, culture, and learning, a meeting place of East and West. The city, bearing his name, symbolized the blending of worlds that Alexander envisioned. While in Egypt, he laid the foundations for lasting governance. He appointed officials, respected traditions, and ensured stability. His rule brought peace and prosperity, and the Egyptians accepted him not only as a conqueror, but as a legitimate ruler. When Alexander left Egypt, he left behind more than buildings. He left a legacy. Alexandria would one day house the greatest library of the ancient world and stand as a testament to his grand ambitions. Chapter 7: The Battle of Gaugamela. After Egypt, Alexander set his sights on a final confrontation with the Persian king Darius III. The place was Gaugamela, a vast plain chosen by Darius to give his massive army and deadly scythe chariots the advantage. Outnumbered, Alexander faced a battle that would decide the fate of the Persian Empire. Darius had every reason to feel confident. His army dwarfed Alexander's in size. The terrain had been leveled for his chariots, but numbers were not everything. Alexander's strategy was clear: outmaneuver, not overpower. On the morning of the battle, he arranged his forces with precision: infantry in the center, cavalry on the flanks, reserves ready to strike. Darius began with a chariot charge, but Alexander had anticipated this. His men opened their ranks, letting the chariots pass harmlessly through, where they were then picked off. Then Alexander spotted his opportunity: a gap in the Persian lines. With lightning speed, he led his companion cavalry in a direct charge toward Darius himself. The charge shattered the Persian ranks. Darius, seeing Alexander closing in, fled. Leaderless, the Persian army collapsed. What followed was a rout. The victory at Gaugamela was decisive. Alexander had won not by brute force, but by superior tactics, courage, and timing. In its aftermath, he marched unopposed into Babylon, Susa, and finally Persepolis, the heart of the Persian world. Gaugamela cemented Alexander's place as one of history's greatest commanders. It wasn't just a battle, it was the end of an empire and the beginning of a new one. Chapter 8: The King of Asia. With Darius defeated and Persia subdued, Alexander claimed a new title, King of Asia. But conquest was only the beginning. Now he had to govern an empire that stretched across cultures, languages, and traditions. Alexander realized that to keep such a diverse realm united, he couldn't rule it like a mere conqueror. He needed to blend worlds. He began by adopting Persian dress and customs, a decision that surprised and unsettled many of his Macedonian followers. To bind his people more closely, he encouraged intermarriage between Macedonians and Persians. He himself married Roxana, a noblewoman from Bactria. He appointed Persians to high office, integrated them into his army, and tried to create a ruling class that reflected the diversity of his empire. This policy of fusion was met with resistance. Some Macedonians saw it as betrayal, but Alexander was undeterred. He envisioned an empire not just built on conquest, but on cooperation. In Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of Persia, Alexander faced a symbolic choice. The great palace was a symbol of Persian might. Whether in a drunken impulse or as a political gesture, he ordered it burned. The flames marked the end of the old world and the beginning of his. Yet challenges remained. Rebellions flared. Not all Persians welcomed his rule, and unity proved elusive. Alexander responded with a mix of diplomacy and force, determined to hold his empire together. In claiming Asia, Alexander did more than conquer land. He attempted to forge a new identity, one that bridged east and west. His policies may not have pleased everyone, but they revealed a ruler who thought beyond borders. Chapter 9: The Afghan Campaign. After conquering Persia, Alexander pressed onward into Afghanistan, a land of mountains, defiance, and endless challenges. Here, Alexander would face a new kind of war, one that tested not just his military skill, but his endurance and patience. Afghanistan was a world away from the open plains of Persia. The terrain was harsh, steep ridges, deep valleys, and narrow passes, and the people were fierce and fiercely independent. Rather than massing in large armies, the Afghan tribes fought in guerrilla fashion, striking quickly, then vanishing into the hills. Alexander was forced to change tactics. He broke his army into smaller, mobile units capable of chasing elusive enemies. It was a punishing campaign. The weather turned cold, the paths treacherous, and supplies hard to come by. Yet Alexander pushed on. He combined military strength with diplomacy, offering protection, respect for local traditions, and positions of power to tribal leaders. Still, loyalty in these lands was fragile. One of the campaign's most dramatic moments came at the Sogdian Rock, a fortress perched on a sheer cliff. The defenders believed it unassailable, but Alexander proved them wrong. He sent climbers up the vertical face at night. When the sun rose, the defenders saw Macedonian soldiers standing above them and surrendered in awe. The Afghan campaign stretched Alexander's army to its limits. More than once, his men questioned the worth of pressing forward, but Alexander's determination was unbreakable. He knew that to reach India and secure the eastern edge of his empire, he had to tame these lands. In the end, Alexander subdued Afghanistan, but not without cost. The campaign was a brutal lesson in the limits of power and the price of ambition. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 10 or create a compiled version for printing or publishing?